The morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as King Charles stood at his office window, watching the early groundskeepers tend to the ancient gardens below. His hands trembled slightly as he held the medical report that would change everything. The diagnosis had come just 3 days earlier, delivered by his personal physician with the kind of gentle gravity that only accompanied the most serious news. Charles had always known this day might come. Cancer had touched his family before, taking his beloved grandmother and affecting other relatives throughout the years. But knowing something might happen and actually facing it were entirely different experiences. The doctors had been thorough in their explanation. The aggressive nature of the particular type affecting him meant that treatment would need to begin immediately, and even then, the outcome remained uncertain. His first thought had not been for himself, but for his family, particularly his son William. The Prince of Wales had already shouldered so much responsibility, stepping up magnificently during Charles's previous health scares, and taking on increasing duties as the years passed. Now, William would need to prepare for possibilities that neither of them had wanted to consider so soon. The king's private secretary knocked softly before entering the room. "Your Majesty, the Prince of Wales has arrived for your meeting." Charles nodded, straightening his shoulders and taking a deep breath. He had requested this private audience with William before any official announcements were made. His son deserved to hear the news directly from him, in the quiet sanctuary of the castle rather than through formal channels or, heaven forbid, from the media. William entered with his characteristic blend of formality and warmth, bowing slightly before embracing his father. They had grown closer over the years, especially since William had married Catherine and started his own family. The bond between them had strengthened through shared duty and mutual respect, making what Charles was about to share all the more difficult. "Father, you sounded quite serious when you called," William said, settling into one of the leather chairs near the fireplace. His keen eye immediately noticed the tension in his father's posture, the way Charles seemed to be choosing his words carefully even before speaking. Charles moved to the chair across from his son, the medical report still clutched in his hand. "William, I've asked you here because we need to discuss some developments that will affect our family and the monarchy. I've received some medical news that I wanted you to hear directly from me." The gravity in his father's voice made William lean forward, his expression shifting from casual concern to focused attention. He had seen this look before, during other family crises, and he knew that whatever was coming would be significant. "The doctors have found something during my recent examinations," Charles continued, his voice steady despite the weight of the words. "It's cancer, and while we're exploring all treatment options, I wanted you to be aware of the situation so we can plan accordingly." The words seemed to hang in the air between them. William felt the familiar sensation of the world shifting slightly, the way it had when his grandmother had passed, when his mother had died, during all the moments that marked significant changes in their lives and duties. But this time, it was his father, the man who had finally achieved his life's ambition of becoming king, now facing a battle that would test everything they had worked toward. William's training kicked in almost immediately. Years of preparation for difficult moments, of understanding that personal feelings had to be balanced with public duty, helped him process the information while maintaining his composure. But beneath that trained response, he felt the deep ache of a son learning that his father was facing a serious illness. "What are the doctors saying about treatment options?" William asked, his voice calm but his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "And what timeline are we looking at?" Charles appreciated his son's practical approach. It was exactly what he had hoped for: acknowledgement of the emotional impact without being overwhelmed by it, immediate focus on what needed to be done. "Treatment will begin next week. The medical team is optimistic about the options available, but they've been clear that it will be a challenging process. We'll need to adjust our schedules accordingly." They spent the next hour discussing the practical implications. William would need to take on additional royal duties immediately, something he was well prepared to do but which would require careful coordination with his existing commitments. Catherine would need to increase her public appearances, and their children's schedules might need adjustment to accommodate the changing family dynamics. But beyond the logistics, there was the emotional reality they were both grappling with. Charles had waited decades to become king, and now, just as he was settling into the role he had trained for his entire life, he was facing a challenge that could cut that service short. William, meanwhile, was confronting the possibility that his own accession to the throne might come sooner than anyone had anticipated. "We should consider when and how to inform the public," William said thoughtfully. The palace communications team will need time to prepare, and we should coordinate with the Prime Minister's office. Charles nodded. I've already spoken with the private secretary about scheduling those conversations. But first, I wanted to make sure you were fully informed. Catherine should know as well, and we'll need to think about how to tell the children. The mention of his grandchildren, George, Charlotte, and Louis, brought a different kind of pain to Charles's eyes. They were still so young, just beginning to understand their place in the royal family, and now they would have to grapple with their grandfather's illness during what should be carefree years of their childhood. William saw the emotion cross his father's face and reached over to place a hand on his arm. We'll get through this, father. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. The family is strong, and the institution is strong. We'll make sure both continue to be. The conversation continued well into the afternoon, covering everything from medical schedules to constitutional questions about the king's ability to carry out his duties during treatment. They discussed contingency plans, the role of the counselors of state, and how to maintain continuity of royal duties while Charles focused on his health. As the day wore on, both men began to process the full magnitude of what lay ahead. For Charles, it meant fighting for his life while trying to continue serving as monarch. For William, it meant stepping even further into the spotlight while supporting his father through the most difficult challenge of his life. When they finally concluded their meeting, the sun was setting over the castle grounds. William embraced his father again, this time holding on a moment longer than usual. I love you, father, he said simply. We're all here for you. Charles felt tears prick at his eyes for the first time since receiving the diagnosis. I love you too, my boy. Thank you for being so strong. As William left to drive back to his own family, Charles returned to his window overlooking the gardens. The groundskeepers had finished their work, and the ancient grounds lay peaceful in the gathering dusk. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, one that would test them in ways they had never imagined. The king picked up his phone to call Catherine, knowing that she deserved to hear the news from him personally as well. Then, there would be calls to Harry, to his siblings, to the Prime Minister, and to all the others who would need to know. But, for this moment, he allowed himself to simply stand in the quiet of his office, gathering strength for the battles ahead. The weight of the crown had always been significant, but now it felt different. Not heavier, exactly, but more precious, more fragile. Charles understood that his time wearing it might be shorter than anyone had hoped, and that knowledge made every moment of his reign more meaningful. Outside, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, just as they had for centuries over Windsor Castle. The monarchy had endured through wars, scandals, personal tragedies, and national crises. Now it would face this challenge too, with the same quiet dignity and determination that had sustained it through all the difficult times before. Charles straightened his shoulders once more, picked up the phone, and began making the calls that would set everything in motion. The nation would learn soon enough about their king's battle, but for now, in these last moments of privacy, he was simply a father who had shared difficult news with his son, and a man preparing to fight for his life. The morning of the announcement dawned gray and somber over London, as if the very sky understood the weight of the news that would soon be shared with the nation. Inside Buckingham Palace, the communications team had been working through the night, crafting the careful words that would inform the public about their king's diagnosis while maintaining the dignity and measured tone that such announcements required. William had arrived early, having barely slept after his conversation with Catherine the night before. She had taken the news with the same grace and strength she had shown throughout their marriage, immediately beginning to think about how they could support Charles while protecting their own children from the full weight of the situation. They had agreed that George, Charlotte, and Louis should be told before the public announcement, but in language appropriate for their ages. The Prince of Wales found his father in the same office where they had spoken the day before, this time dressed formally and reviewing the final draft of the statement that would be released within the hour. Charles looked older somehow, as if the weight of sharing his diagnosis had aged him overnight, but his posture remained erect and his voice steady. The statement looks appropriate, Charles said, handing the paper to William. Factual, honest, but not overly dramatic. The medical team has reviewed it to ensure accuracy, and the Prime Minister has been briefed. William read through the carefully chosen words, noting how they struck a balance between transparency and privacy, acknowledging the seriousness of the situation while expressing optimism about the treatment ahead. It was a masterclass in royal communication, saying exactly what needed to be said and nothing more. "Have you spoken with Harry?" William asked, knowing that his brother would need to hear the news before it became public. Despite the distance between them in recent years, family health crises had a way of putting other concerns into perspective. Charles nodded. "I called him this morning, London time. He was shocked, of course, but supportive. He's making arrangements to come over for a visit once the initial treatment begins." There was a note of hope in Charles's voice that suggested this crisis might help bridge some of the gaps that had developed within the family. The palace's director of communications entered the room, tablet in hand, ready to coordinate the release across all official channels. "Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, we're ready to proceed whenever you give the word. The statement will go out simultaneously to all media outlets, and we have responses prepared for the most likely follow-up questions." Charles looked at his son one more time. "Are you ready for this? Once we release this statement, everything changes. The scrutiny will be intense, and much of the burden will fall on you and Catherine." William met his father's gaze steadily. "We're ready, Father. This is what we've trained for, even if we hoped we'd never need to use that training." The king nodded to the communications director, who immediately began the process that would inform the world about the royal health crisis. Within minutes, news alerts would be pinging on phones across the globe, newsrooms would be scrambling to prepare coverage, and the palace switchboard would be overwhelmed with calls from media outlets seeking additional information. But in those final moments of privacy, Charles and William stood together at the window, watching the changing of the guard ceremony taking place in the courtyard below. The ritual had continued uninterrupted for centuries, a visible symbol of the continuity that the monarchy represented. Today, it took on additional significance as a reminder that the institution was larger than any individual, even the king himself. The first indication that the news had broken came from the security detail, whose earpieces began crackling with increased chatter about media presence outside the palace gates. Within 30 minutes, the usual tourist crowds had been joined by television trucks, photographers, and reporters, all hoping to capture some visual element to accompany their coverage of the shocking announcement. Charles watched the gathering crowd with a mixture of resignation and understanding. He had lived his entire life in the public eye, and he knew that his personal health challenge would become a matter of national interest. It was one of the prices of the position he had sought for so long. "The response will be mixed," he observed to William. "Some will be genuinely concerned and supportive. Others will see it as an opportunity to discuss succession planning or to question whether I should abdicate. We need to be prepared for both." William understood. The British public's relationship with their royal family was complex, mixing genuine affection with criticism, respect with irreverence. A health crisis would bring out both the best and worst of those tendencies, and the family would need to navigate all of it while Charles focused on his treatment. Catherine arrived at the palace shortly after the announcement went live, having dropped the children at school with extra security arrangements already in place. The Princess of Wales moved with purpose through the palace corridors, her presence bringing a sense of calm efficiency that everyone around her had come to rely on. She found Charles and William still in the office, now monitoring the initial media response on multiple screens. "How are you holding up?" she asked Charles, giving him a warm embrace that conveyed both affection and support. Throughout their relationship, Catherine had developed a special bond with her father-in-law, appreciating his dedication to duty while also understanding the personal costs of royal life. "Better than I expected," Charles replied honestly. "There's something liberating about having it out in the open." The secrecy was becoming a burden. The three of them spent the next hour reviewing the immediate response. The Prime Minister had issued a statement of support. Commonwealth leaders were expressing their concern and best wishes. Religious leaders were calling for prayers. The opposition political parties were maintaining respectful silence on partisan issues while expressing hope for the king's recovery. But it was the response from ordinary citizens that proved most moving. Social media was filled with messages of support and encouragement. Flowers were already beginning to appear outside palace gates. Former cancer patients were sharing their own stories of recovery, offering hope and solidarity with their monarch. "Look at this," Catherine said, showing them her phone screen where a hashtag supporting the king was trending worldwide. "People from every continent are sending their thoughts and prayers." Charles felt a warmth spread through his chest as he saw the genuine outpouring of support. After decades of sometimes difficult relationships with the press and public, this reminder that people cared about him not just as a king but as a human being facing a health challenge was deeply meaningful. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors and phone calls. Charles's siblings arrived to offer their support and to discuss how they could assist with royal duties during his treatment. The Archbishop of Canterbury came to provide spiritual counsel and to discuss special prayers that would be offered in churches across the realm. Medical specialists briefed the family on what to expect in the coming weeks. The treatment would be aggressive but manageable, allowing Charles to continue some royal duties while prioritizing his health. There would be good days and difficult days, and they would need to remain flexible in their planning. As evening approached, the initial shock began to settle into a new reality. This was their life now, navigating a health crisis while maintaining the dignity and continuity that the monarchy required. It would not be easy, but they were not facing it alone. William prepared to return home to his family, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities. His calendar was already being adjusted to accommodate additional engagements that Charles would no longer be able to fulfill. The transition they had all known would come eventually was beginning earlier than expected. "Thank you for today," Charles said as William prepared to leave. "For your strength, your support, your leadership. I couldn't ask for a better son or a better heir." The words carried additional weight now, given the uncertainty ahead. William embraced his father, feeling the full responsibility of what lay before him, while also feeling grateful for the time they still had together. As night fell over London, the lights in the palace burned later than usual as staff continued coordinating the response to the day's announcement. Charles finally retired to his private quarters, where he found a stack of personal letters that had already arrived from well-wishers around the world. He opened a few before bed: a note from a fellow cancer survivor in Scotland, a letter from children at a school he had visited years earlier, a message from a Commonwealth leader sharing his own experience with serious illness. Each one reminded him that while his position was unique, his struggle was shared by millions of others who had faced similar diagnoses. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of treatment and a new chapter in his reign. But tonight, surrounded by the support of his family and the prayers of his people, Charles felt as ready as anyone could be to face the battle ahead. The crown would endure, the monarchy would continue, and he would fight with everything he had to ensure both remained strong for future generations. The treatment center at the private hospital in London had been carefully prepared for the king's arrival. Security teams had swept the building multiple times, medical equipment had been double-checked, and a special suite had been arranged to provide both the clinical care Charles needed and the privacy that royal protocol demanded. Despite these preparations, there was an unusual tension in the air as staff members prepared to treat their most famous patient. Charles arrived early on a Tuesday morning, accompanied by William and a small security detail. He had insisted on walking into the building under his own power, understanding that photographs of this moment would be studied and analyzed around the world. His bearing remained dignified, though those who knew him well could see the slight stiffness in his movements that suggested anxiety beneath his composed exterior. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the lead oncologist who had been treating royal family members for over a decade, met them at the entrance to the treatment wing. She had earned the family's trust through her combination of medical expertise and understanding of the unique pressures that came with treating public figures. Her calm demeanor immediately helped ease some of the tension surrounding the king's arrival. "Your Majesty," she said with a slight bow, "we're ready to begin whenever you are. The treatment room has been prepared according to your preferences, and we've arranged for minimal staff interaction to ensure your privacy." Charles appreciated the thoughtful arrangements, but he also knew that the real challenge was not the physical environment, but the psychological one. This was his first step into a battle that would test not only his body but his mental strength and his ability to continue functioning as monarch while fighting for his life. William accompanied his father to the treatment room, where they spent a few quiet moments together before the medical team arrived. The Prince of Wales had cleared his entire schedule for the day, understanding that his presence during this first treatment session was more important than any royal engagement he might miss. "How are you feeling?" William asked, noting that his father seemed calmer now that they were actually beginning the process rather than simply waiting for it to start. Oddly relieved, Charles admitted. "All the planning and preparation, all the worry about what it would be like. Now we can actually start fighting this thing instead of just thinking about it." The first treatment session lasted several hours, during which Charles remained remarkably composed. He had brought reading material, briefing papers about upcoming state visits, and correspondence from various organizations he patronized. Even here, receiving chemotherapy, he was determined to continue his royal duties as much as possible. William divided his time between staying with his father and managing the stream of communications from palace staff. The day's royal engagements had been redistributed among other family members, but there were still decisions that required input from either the king or his heir. The reality of governing while managing a health crisis was more complex than any of them had anticipated. Dr. Mitchell checked on Charles regularly throughout the treatment, monitoring both his physical response and his emotional state. She had seen many patients face their first cancer treatment, and she was impressed by the king's composure and determination. His years of training in public service seemed to be serving him well in this very private battle. The king is responding well to the initial treatment, she explained to William during a brief consultation outside the treatment room. His physical condition is good, and his mental approach is excellent. Those factors will be crucial in the weeks ahead. As the treatment concluded, Charles felt a wave of fatigue that he tried to hide, but which William noticed immediately. The prince helped his father to the car, making mental notes about what adjustments might need to be made to accommodate the effects of ongoing treatment. The ride back to Windsor was quiet, both men lost in their own thoughts about what they had just experienced. For Charles, it was the beginning of a journey whose outcome remained uncertain. For William, it was a stark reminder of how quickly everything could change, and how much responsibility was shifting to his shoulders. Catherine was waiting when they arrived at the castle, having spent the day managing increased media attention while maintaining her own royal schedule. She had fielded dozens of calls from concerned friends and family members, all wanting updates on Charles's condition while respecting the privacy that the situation required. "How did it go?" she asked, embracing both Charles and William as they entered the private family quarters. "Better than expected," Charles replied, settling into his favorite armchair with obvious relief. "Dr. Mitchell says the treatment went smoothly, and I feel, well, tired, but not as awful as I had feared." They spent the evening quietly, sharing dinner and discussing the practical adjustments that would need to be made in the coming weeks. Charles would need to modify his schedule significantly, attending only the most essential engagements and delegating many responsibilities to other family members. William and Catherine had already begun coordinating with palace staff to ensure seamless coverage of royal duties. The princess would increase her public appearances, taking on several engagements that had been scheduled for Charles. William would handle the more formal constitutional responsibilities that could not be delegated to anyone outside the direct line of succession. "The children have been asking about Grandpapa," Catherine mentioned carefully. They had told George, Charlotte, and Louis that their grandfather was receiving medical treatment, but had kept the explanation age-appropriate and optimistic. Charles's face softened at the mention of his grandchildren. "I'd like to see them this weekend, if possible. I know we need to be careful about exposure and schedules, but I don't want them to feel like my treatment has made me unavailable to them." The following weeks established a new routine that balanced medical needs with royal responsibilities. Charles would receive treatment twice weekly, with his schedule arranged to minimize the impact on his public duties. On good days, he would attend selected engagements, always with medical staff on standby. On difficult days, he would work from his private office, handling correspondence and making decisions that didn't require his physical presence. William's role during this period evolved dramatically. He began attending meetings that had previously been Charles's exclusive domain, sitting in on briefings with government officials, and taking on ceremonial duties that required the monarch's representative. The transition was gradual but unmistakable. The future king was beginning to assume responsibilities that would one day be entirely his own. The public response to Charles's treatment was overwhelmingly supportive, though it came with increased scrutiny of every appearance and public statement. Photographers analyzed his complexion for signs of treatment effects. Royal correspondents speculated about the implications for succession planning. Security arrangements were heightened as authorities worried about potential threats to a monarch whose health was temporarily compromised. Through it all, Charles maintained his dignity and determination. He continued reading state papers, meeting with advisors, and making decisions about the hundreds of organizations and causes he supported. The treatment was challenging, but it had not diminished his commitment to the role he had waited decades to fulfill. One particularly meaningful moment came during a visit from Harry, who flew in from California for a private family gathering. The reunion between father and son, facilitated by Charles's health crisis, provided hope that family divisions might begin to heal during this difficult time. "I'm proud of how you're handling this, Dad," Harry said during their private conversation. You're showing the same strength that Granny always did during difficult times. The comparison to Queen Elizabeth II was especially poignant for Charles, who had always strived to live up to her example of duty and service. Knowing that his son saw those qualities in his response to this health challenge was deeply meaningful. As the initial phase of treatment progressed, Charles began to understand that this experience was changing him in ways he hadn't expected. The confrontation with mortality had clarified his priorities, making him more focused on what truly mattered, and less concerned with the minor frustrations that had sometimes bothered him in the past. The cancer diagnosis had brought devastating news, but it had also revealed the strength of the institutions and relationships that surrounded him. The monarchy was proving its resilience, his family was demonstrating its unity, and the British people were showing their capacity for compassion and support during difficult times. Dr. Mitchell's regular reports were cautiously optimistic. The king was responding well to treatment, his spirits remained high, and his determination to continue his royal duties was actually helping rather than hindering his recovery. The combination of excellent medical care, strong family support, and a sense of purpose was creating ideal conditions for healing. As winter began to give way to spring, Charles found himself thinking not just about surviving his illness, but about what kind of king he wanted to be once he had overcome it. The experience was teaching him lessons about resilience, about the importance of family, and about the profound connection between the monarchy and the people it served. The battle was far from over, but the king was fighting it with everything he had, supported by a nation that had embraced him in his vulnerability and a family that had rallied around him in his time of need. The devastating news had become a story of courage, determination, and the enduring power of hope. The spring months brought a mixture of hope and uncertainty as Charles progressed through his treatment regimen. The cherry blossoms in the palace gardens bloomed with unusual vigor that year, and Charles found himself spending more time than ever before simply observing the natural world from his office windows. The treatment had given him a new appreciation for simple pleasures and quiet moments that he had often rushed through in previous years. Dr. Mitchell's latest reports were encouraging but measured. The cancer was responding to treatment better than initially expected, and Charles's overall health remained stable. However, she cautioned that they were still in the early stages of what would likely be a long journey, and maintaining optimism while remaining realistic about challenges ahead was crucial for both patient and family. William had settled into his expanded role with remarkable grace, though the demands were taking their toll. He was now handling nearly twice his previous workload while trying to maintain normalcy for his own young family. Catherine had become his closest advisor and strongest support, helping him navigate the complex balance between supporting his father and preparing for increased responsibilities that might become permanent sooner than anyone had planned. The Prince of Wales found himself in an unusual position, effectively serving as regent while his father remained king, a situation that required delicate navigation of constitutional protocols and family dynamics. Charles remained actively involved in all major decisions, but William was increasingly becoming the public face of the monarchy during this transitional period. The constitutional experts have been helpful, William explained to Charles during one of their weekly private meetings. There are precedents for situations like this, though none exactly match our circumstances. The key is maintaining clear communication about who is handling what responsibilities. Charles appreciated his son's thoughtful approach to the situation. You're handling this magnificently, William. I couldn't be more proud of how you've stepped up during this difficult time. Your mother would be so proud too. The mention of Diana brought a moment of shared emotion between father and son. Both men often thought about how she would have handled this crisis, and they drew strength from imagining her fierce determination and protective instincts guiding them through the challenges. One significant development during this period was the return of Harry for an extended visit. The Duke of Sussex had arranged to spend several weeks in England, ostensibly to support his father during treatment, but also to begin rebuilding relationships that had been strained in recent years. The health crisis had provided an opportunity for the family to focus on what truly mattered rather than the disagreements that had divided them. Harry's presence brought a different energy to family gatherings. His irreverent humor and casual approach helped lighten moods during difficult moments, while his obvious concern for his father's health demonstrated that family bonds remained strong despite geographical distance and recent tensions. It's good to have both my boys here, Charles confided to Catherine during a quiet moment at Windsor. I know Harry can't stay permanently, but Having this time together has been a gift I hadn't expected from this situation. The public's response to the ongoing health crisis continued to evolve as well. Initial shock had given way to sustained support, with regular prayer services being held in churches across the Commonwealth, and ongoing charitable fundraising efforts inspired by the King's battle. Cancer research organizations reported increased donations and volunteer applications, suggesting that Charles's openness about his diagnosis was having positive effects beyond the royal family. Media coverage had also matured from the initial frenzy to more respectful and measured reporting. While interest remained high, most outlets had settled into a pattern of providing updates without sensationalizing every development or speculating excessively about succession planning. Charles had made a conscious decision to be more open about his experience than previous generations of royals might have been. He occasionally shared brief statements about his treatment progress, and he had agreed to a carefully planned public appearance to demonstrate his continued engagement with royal duties. The appearance, at a reception for cancer researchers and survivors, was deeply moving for everyone involved. Charles looked thinner than before his diagnosis, and the effects of treatment were visible, but his presence was powerful and his commitment to the cause was unmistakable. Your Majesty's courage in sharing your journey has meant so much to cancer patients everywhere, one researcher told him during the event. You've shown that this disease affects everyone, regardless of their position, but also that it can be faced with dignity and hope. Charles was touched by the comment, and similar sentiments expressed throughout the evening. He had worried that his health crisis might diminish his effectiveness as a symbol of national strength, but instead he was learning that vulnerability honestly expressed could be its own form of leadership. The event also showcased William's growing confidence in his expanded role. He moved easily among the guests, demonstrating detailed knowledge of cancer research initiatives and speaking eloquently about the importance of supporting both patients and their families. Observers noted that he seemed completely comfortable representing the monarchy in this capacity. Behind the scenes, palace staff were working overtime to maintain the complex scheduling that Charles's treatment required while ensuring continuity of royal functions. Private secretaries coordinated with medical teams, security details adapted to new routines, and communications specialists managed ongoing public interest in the king's progress. Catherine's role during this period was particularly crucial. As someone who had married into the royal family rather than being born to it, she brought an outsider's perspective that helped bridge different viewpoints within the family. Her natural warmth and genuine concern for Charles's well-being made her an effective intermediary when tensions arose over treatment decisions or scheduling conflicts. Catherine has been extraordinary, Charles told his longtime friend and advisor. She's managed to support William while also being a source of comfort for me. The family is lucky to have her. The princess had indeed proven herself to be remarkably adaptable during the crisis. She had increased her own public appearances while also ensuring that her children maintained stability despite the ongoing family upheaval. Her presence at Charles's side during public events provided visual continuity and reassurance to the public. As summer approached, the family began planning for what they hoped would be a period of gradual improvement and stabilization. Charles's treatment schedule would continue for several more months, but early indicators suggested that he was responding well and might be able to resume a more normal schedule by autumn. However, they also acknowledged that things might never return exactly to the way they had been before. The experience had changed all of them. Charles had gained new perspective on what truly mattered. William had accelerated his preparation for eventual kingship, and the family had rediscovered the importance of unity during difficult times. Whatever happens, William told his father during one of their evening conversations, we've learned that we can handle more than we thought we could. The institution is stronger than we realized, and so is our family. Charles nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the way his loved ones had rallied around him. The devastating news that had shaken the monarchy months earlier was gradually being transformed into a story of resilience, family bonds, and the enduring strength of institutions built to withstand even the most serious challenges. The king looked forward to the coming months with cautious optimism, knowing that while his health battle was not yet over, he was not fighting it alone. The support of his family, the dedication of his medical team, and the prayers of his people had created a foundation of strength that would sustain him through whatever lay ahead. As he prepared for bed that evening, Charles reflected on how much his perspective had changed since receiving his diagnosis. The crown that had once felt like the culmination of a lifetime's preparation now seemed like a precious trust to be cherished and protected, not just for his own reign, but for the future generations who would inherit it after him. The autumn light filtered through the stained glass windows of St. George's Chapel as the royal family gathered for a private service of Thanksgiving. It had been 8 months since Charles received his cancer diagnosis, and while his journey was far from complete, the latest medical reports brought the most encouraging news yet. Dr. Mitchell had confirmed that the treatment was achieving better results than they had dared hope for in those dark early days. Charles sat in the front pew beside William, with Catherine and the children nearby. The service was small and intimate, attended only by close family members and a few longtime friends and advisors. The Archbishop of Canterbury had crafted special prayers acknowledging both the challenges overcome and the uncertainties that remained, creating a ceremony that honored the king's courage while avoiding premature celebration. "We gather today not to declare victory, but to acknowledge grace," the archbishop intoned. "In times of trial, we discover strengths we did not know we possessed, and bonds we had perhaps taken for granted." The words resonated deeply with everyone present. The past months had tested the royal family in ways none of them could have anticipated, but they had also revealed reserves of strength and unity that had surprised even those closest to the situation. Charles felt a profound sense of gratitude as he looked around the chapel. Harry had returned for this service, bringing Meghan and their children for a visit that symbolized the family healing that had emerged from the health crisis. The disagreements and tensions that had once seemed insurmountable now appeared petty in comparison to the fundamental bonds that connected them. William's transformation over the past months had been remarkable to witness. The Prince of Wales had evolved from heir-in-waiting to active co-leader of the monarchy, handling responsibilities that would have seemed premature just a year earlier. His confidence had grown, his public speaking had become more authoritative, and his understanding of constitutional matters had deepened considerably. "Your son has become quite the statesman," the Prime Minister had confided to Charles during a recent meeting. "His handling of this transition period has impressed everyone in government. The country can feel confident about the future of the monarchy." Charles had felt immense pride hearing those words, but also a complex mix of emotions about what they represented. William's readiness for greater responsibility was reassuring, but it also served as a reminder of his own mortality and the changes that lay ahead. The treatment schedule had stabilized into a manageable routine, allowing Charles to resume many of his royal duties while maintaining the medical care he needed. He had learned to pace himself differently, choosing engagements more carefully and allowing himself rest periods that he might have dismissed as unnecessary in earlier years. One of the most meaningful developments had been his increased involvement with cancer-related charities and research organizations. His personal experience had given him insights and credibility that enhanced his advocacy for improved treatment and support services. He had become a powerful voice for early detection and the importance of mental health support for cancer patients and their families. "Your Majesty's openness about your experience has revolutionized how we talk about cancer in this country," the director of a leading research institute had told him. "You've helped remove stigma and encouraged thousands of people to seek early screening." Catherine's role had also evolved significantly during this period. The Princess of Wales had seamlessly expanded her public responsibilities while providing crucial support to both Charles and William. Her natural empathy and strong work ethic had made her increasingly popular with the public, and her presence at royal events provided continuity and reassurance during a time of uncertainty. The children had adapted to the changes in their family dynamics with the resilience that often characterizes young people facing challenging circumstances. George, Charlotte, and Louis had learned about illness and recovery in age-appropriate ways, and their obvious love for their grandfather had provided some of the most touching moments during his treatment journey. "Grandpapa looks much better now," Charlotte had observed during a recent family dinner, with the directness that children bring to difficult topics. "When will he be completely better?" Charles had explained that getting better from his type of illness took a very long time, but that he was feeling stronger and was hopeful about the future. These conversations with his grandchildren had become precious to him, reminding him of the personal stakes involved in his recovery beyond his royal responsibilities. As the chapel service concluded, the family moved to Windsor Castle for a private celebration lunch. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful in a way that had been rare during the intense early months of treatment. Laughter echoed through the dining room as family members shared stories and caught up on the normal details of life that had sometimes been overshadowed by medical appointments and treatment schedules. Charles found himself observing his family with new eyes, appreciating nuances of personality and relationship that his previous busy schedule had not allowed him to notice. Harry's dry humor, William's growing gravitas, Catherine's gift for making everyone feel included, the children's infectious energy. All of it seemed more precious now than it had before his diagnosis. "This has been the strangest year of my life," Charles confided to William during a quiet moment after lunch. "The worst experience I've ever faced, but also, in some ways, one of the most meaningful." William understood what his father meant. The crisis had stripped away many of the formalities and protocols that usually governed their interactions, allowing for deeper conversations and stronger emotional connections. They had faced the possibility of loss together and had emerged with a relationship that was both more honest and more loving than before. The evening brought the traditional family gathering in the castle's drawing room, where they shared tea and continued conversations that ranged from serious discussions about future plans to lighthearted debates about television programs and sports results. It was the kind of normal family time that Charles had often missed during his years as Prince of Wales, when duty had frequently taken precedence over personal relationships. As the day wound down and family members began to disperse to their respective homes, Charles felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. He was not naive about the challenges that still lay ahead. His treatment would continue for many more months, and there would undoubtedly be difficult days mixed with the good ones. But he had learned that he could face those challenges with the support of people who loved him and institutions that were stronger than he had fully appreciated. The devastating news that had shaken the monarchy at the beginning of the year had gradually transformed into a story of resilience, adaptation, and renewal. The nation had mourned with their king when he announced his diagnosis, but they had also witnessed his courage and determination in the months that followed. Charles prepared for bed that night with a heart full of gratitude. He was grateful for the excellent medical care that was helping him fight his illness, for the family that had rallied around him with such love and strength, and for the people of his realm who had supported him with their prayers and encouragement. Looking toward the future, he saw reasons for hope and optimism. His health was improving, his family was stronger than it had been in years, and the monarchy had proven its ability to adapt and endure even during the most challenging circumstances. William was ready to shoulder greater responsibilities. Catherine was becoming an increasingly effective royal partner, and the next generation was growing up with a clear understanding of both the privileges and responsibilities that came with their positions. The king's battle with cancer was not over, but he was winning it day by day, treatment by treatment, with the support of everyone who mattered most to him. The devastating news had become a story of hope, and the nation that had mourned with him in his diagnosis was now celebrating his progress toward recovery. As he switched off the light in his bedroom, Charles offered a prayer of thanksgiving for the gift of another day, another chance to serve, and another opportunity to appreciate the blessings that surrounded him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, and he was ready to face them with the strength, wisdom, and love that this difficult year had taught him to embrace. The monarchy would endure, the family would thrive, and the king would continue to fight with everything he had for the people and institutions he had pledged his life to serve. The devastating news had become a testament to the power of hope, the strength of love, and the enduring resilience of the human spirit.